crushing weight, a story of lost dreams and unyielding sacrifice. Isabel sat at the kitchen table, staring at the pile of bills in front of her. It was the same routine every month, sorting through the envelopes, trying to prioritize which ones to pay and which ones would have to wait. But this time, something was different. This time, the numbers didn't add up. She shuffled through the papers again, her hands trembling. Rent, utilities, groceries, the minimum payment on her credit cards, and of course, her mother's medical bills. The stack was thicker than ever, and for the first time, Isabel couldn't see a way out. The weight of it all pressed down on her chest, making it hard to breathe. How had it come to this? How had she let herself fall so far? Her mother, Elena, had been diagnosed with cancer 2 years ago. The news had shattered Isabel, but there was no time to grieve. Elena needed treatment, and treatment cost money, more money than Isabel had ever imagined. The medical bills piled up faster than she could pay them, and soon, she found herself drowning in debt. Isabel worked full-time as a manager at a local grocery store, a job she had held for nearly 2 decades. It wasn't glamorous, but it had always been enough, until now. She picked up extra shifts whenever she could, working late into the night and on weekends, but it never seemed to be enough. The more she worked, the deeper she fell into the hole of debt, unable to dig herself out. The worst part was the loneliness. Her father had walked out of their lives just after she graduated college, leaving Isabel and Elena to fend for themselves. He had gone back to his first love, leaving Isabel with a bitter taste in her mouth and a heart full of resentment. Her older brother Julian had never been much help. He had his own family to support and rarely called, let alone offered any financial assistance. The few times Isabel had reached out to him, his responses were curt and dismissive. "I've got my own problems," he would say. "You're the one who chose to stay with Mom. You knew what you were getting into." But Isabel hadn't known. She hadn't known how it would feel to watch her mother waste away, to see the vibrant, strong woman she had once been reduced to a frail shadow of herself. She hadn't known how it would feel to be constantly afraid of losing her mother, afraid of losing everything. She hadn't known how it would feel to be so utterly alone. As the months passed, Isabel's depression deepened. She stopped sleeping, her mind racing with worries about how she would pay the next bill, how she would keep her job when she was so exhausted she could barely function, how she would survive when her mother was gone. More than once, in the dead of night, when the weight of her responsibilities became too much to bear, Isabel thought about ending it all. She imagined a world where she and her mother didn't have to suffer anymore, where they could both finally find peace. The thought was dark, terrifying, and yet strangely comforting in those moments of utter despair. But each time she would brush the thought aside, horrified at herself for even considering it. She couldn't do that to her mother, who was fighting so hard just to stay alive. She couldn't give up, not when Elena still needed her. Still, the thoughts lingered at the edges of her mind, a constant reminder of how close she was to breaking. Isabel felt trapped, suffocating under the weight of her responsibilities. She had no one to turn to, no one to lean on. Her friends had drifted away over the years, and she was too proud to ask for help. She didn't want pity, she just wanted to find a way out of this nightmare. But the harder she fought, the more hopeless it seemed. The days blurred together, each one a repetition of the last. Work, worry, collapse into bed, and then do it all over again. The only respite she had was when she sat by her mother's bedside, holding Elena's hand as she slept. In those moments, Isabel allowed herself to cry, the tears silently streaming down her face. She didn't want to burden her mother with her fears, so she kept them locked away, deep inside, where no one could see. Elena, of course, knew. She could see the toll it was taking on her daughter, and it broke her heart. But she was too weak to do anything about it, and that knowledge filled her with guilt. She had always been the strong one, the one who held the family together, and now she was the reason Isabel was falling apart. One evening, after another long day at work, Isabel returned home to find her mother struggling to breathe. Panic gripped her as she called an ambulance, her hands trembling as she held the phone. The ride to the hospital felt like an eternity, and by the time they arrived, Isabel was a wreck. She paced the waiting room, her mind racing with thoughts of what she would do if she lost her mother now. When the doctor finally came out, his face was grim. "She's stable for now," he said, "but the cancer has spread. There's not much more we can do." The words hit Isabel like a physical blow, knocking the wind out of her. She felt the ground shift beneath her feet, and she collapsed into a chair, her head in her hands. This was it. The end was near, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Over the next few weeks, Elena's condition worsened. Isabel spent every moment she could by her mother's side, watching helplessly as the life slowly drained out of her. She wanted to scream, to rage against the unfairness of it all, but she was too tired. All she could do was sit there, holding her mother's hand, trying to memorize every detail of her face before it was too late. At night, when the house was quiet and her mother was finally asleep, Isabel would lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, remembering the life she had once imagined for herself. There had been dreams once, so many dreams. She had wanted to travel, to see the world beyond the small town where she had grown up. She had dreamed of starting her own business, of having a family, of living a life full of adventure and purpose. But all of that felt like a lifetime ago, like someone else's story. Now her life was a blur of work, bills, and responsibilities. She worked tirelessly, paycheck to paycheck, not to build the future she had once envisioned but just to survive. The weight of it was unbearable some nights, the suffocating feeling of being trapped in a life she never wanted, with no way out. She lived to pay the bills, nothing more. Each day was a repetition of the last, and each night, she was haunted by the dreams she had given up. As she lay there in the darkness, the memories would come rushing back, the plans she had made, the hopes she had once held so tightly, and with those memories came the tears, the silent sobs that she buried deep inside, where no one could see. She cried for the woman she had once been, for the future she had once believed in. She cried because she knew, deep down, that those dreams would never come true. Isabel had set her dreams aside to care for her mother, to support them both. And though she loved her mother dearly, there was an ache inside her that she couldn't shake, a feeling that she had lost herself along the way. She had become a shadow of the woman she once was, defined not by her passions or her goals, but by her obligations. As the tears fell, Isabel felt the familiar knot in her chest tighten. She didn't know how to reclaim those dreams, or if it was even possible. All she knew was that she had sacrificed so much, and now she wasn't sure there was anything left of herself to salvage. And so she cried herself to sleep, night after night, mourning the life she would never live, while the weight of her reality pressed down on her, heavier than ever. But every morning, she forced herself out of bed, steeled her resolve, and faced the day. She would do it for her mother. She would keep fighting, keep sacrificing, because that was all she knew how to do. Even as the dreams faded further into the past, and the crushing weight of her responsibilities grew heavier, Isabel refused to give up. She couldn't. Not while her mother still needed her. But as she lay in bed each night, she wondered how much longer she could carry on before the weight finally broke her.